The Western New York Regional Education Center for Economic Development presents Target Success. Bringing together leaders in business, industry, and education for worker training and community progress. Established in 1983, the Western New York Regional Education Center for Economic Development has been designated by the State Education Department to coordinate employment and training programs across New York. The Western New York Center serves Erie, Niagara, Chautauqua, Cattaraugus, and Allegheny counties. And now, here's the host of Target Success, Jerald Wolfgang.
Welcome to Target Success. Our weekly cable television program brings together leaders from the fields of business, education, economic development, and government. Today we have with us Paul Gromosiak. Paul is a local historian, an author, and has attachment to a place called the Niagara Experience Center. Welcome, Paul.
Thank you.
We're really glad to have you, and here really I want to start the program in talking about the history of the greater Niagara area, and I'm really talking with an expert who has written 8 books about the falls and about the history of this area. And I'd really like to know a little more about it for our listening audience. Before the program, you mentioned some great historical points, certainly the fort in the Upper River.
Of course, we have the jewel right now, which is Old Fort Niagara. I can't say enough about how well run that facility is, but it would be nice to have more facilities similar to that, extending along the Niagara River all the way to Buffalo for that matter. And we do have places where interesting events took place in the past, such as the construction of the very first ship to sail the Upper Great Lakes. That was built in LaSalle, called the Griffin.
It was built by LaSalle, wasn't it?
It was built by the explorer LaSalle, in LaSalle. And how do you think what was the village of LaSalle got its name? From the man who's known throughout the world. That man made his reputation throughout the world. Well, he built the very first ship to sail the Upper Lakes here.
And then we come down the river toward, actually, I would call the Portage area, since I grew up on Portage Road in Niagara Falls, and we had another facility guarding the Portage.
Yes, you had Fort Schlosser, which was built by the British in 1760. Before them, you had the French fort, and then a part of that fort, both forts that still exist today, is the old stone chimney, which you can see near the daily exit of the boulevard there, the parkway, I should say. And that was attached to a structure which housed British soldiers, French soldiers, and which became a very important part of our history. And that fort protected the portage, the important link between Lake Ontario and Lake Erie.
Now, if we go down to the other end, to what would be now Art Park, we had another facility there.
Yes, you had Fort Jonquière, or a small trading post built there by Chabert-Jonquière, and it protected the lower landing of the portage. And of course, before the French and British were here, the Native Americans too used the portage. That's who started that great portage, the Native American people.
So we really had, before the white man came here, we had really Indian, I want to say, areas in the upper river and in the lower river.
Yes.
And that in developing that portage, then certainly the white man, or certainly the traders, developed that with putting outposts there, first for just trading with the Indians, and then forts to protect the area.
Yes. Don't forget, water was the major way of travel years ago. You didn't have highways, you didn't have vehicles except for simple wagons. And so you always had to find the easiest water route to go from one place to another. And of course, the Niagara River was a great way to go from the upper Lake Ontario to Lake Erie, but you had the problem with the falls and the gorge. And so you had to portage, as the French would say. You had to get your boats and canoes and climb up Lewiston Hill or the Niagara Escarpment, and then go to the upper river, and then vice versa from the upper river down to Lewiston. But it was worthwhile doing it, because then you got back on Lake Erie, and then you could take the rivers down south. You could go to Lake Huron and the other Great Lakes. So it was a wonderful way to go from east to west.
So we had then part of the Iroquois Confederacy. This was the trading, really one of the top trading areas then, I would believe.
Indeed. It was the way to the west. And the Seneca Nation were the people who protected it for the Six Nations, as they call themselves today. And so this was the place where the decision was made who controlled North America. Because if you controlled this river, you controlled movement to the west, and from the west to the east.
Well, we've given everyone certainly a little bit of a historical lesson, with a lot more certainly to come today. Should this be an economic asset?
Oh, without a doubt. Because I've spoken to tens of thousands of visitors to the falls through the years, and they want to know what makes us stand out from the rest of the world. And our history is what makes us stand out.
Now, we have pictures certainly of the French looking at the falls for the first time. That was, what, in the 1600s, I believe?
1678 is when Father Louis Hennepin is supposed to have come to see the falls in December of that year.
And now we've heard that that might have been certainly a great stop for him, but there were earlier visits, certainly, of French and traders that got here.
Yes.
We just might not have.
One that we are almost certain was here before Father Hennepin was Etienne Brulé, a French trader. But he didn't write about what he experienced over here, whereas Hennepin did.
Okay. How can we really use this asset as an economic and tourism tool to bring more people here and really to provide more business activity?
Well, what we need is a facility, a place where our visitors can go to become excited about our history. And not just an ordinary museum, a center, a place where they can go and their appetite for interest in our history can be whetted enough so that they'll want to leave that facility and visit historical sites throughout the Western New York region, especially Niagara County, around the falls. And so I'm working with the state and other people, local people, on this project to establish the Niagara Experience Center in downtown Niagara Falls.
What is the Niagara Experience Center?
Well, it will be the building itself will hopefully be an attraction, a destination for people. It will stand out itself. And then when people go into this building, they will experience all the different aspects of history here. The natural history, the Native American, the French and British colonial history, early American, the War of 1812, the Civil War, the Free Niagara movement, the Underground Railroad, industry, hydroelectric power, all those things. And then we will tell them where they can go in Western New York to see some aspects of these parts of our history.
So this particular, let's say, facility, which is not up yet, and I know you've been working hard on developing a concept, a plan, and New York State now, I guess it would be USA Niagara,
Yes.
Which is the development agency that the governor has put in Niagara Falls. They've agreed to develop this
Yes.
in conjunction with who?
Well, right now we have put together a interim board of directors, and I'm honored to be on that board. And we are in the process now of interviewing consultants who will come up with ideas for how the building should be designed, outside and inside. And sometime this year, we're going to have a design charrette to which these people will come, and each one will try to convince us that they are the ones we should work with to come up with a design for the facility. So this design charrette will take a few days. It's not open to the public because it's very much involved, and we just won't have time right now. But it's going to be a very, very serious discussion of how this building should be done. And we will, of course, consult with other historians. I'm certainly not the only person qualified to offer opinions on this.
Now, this facility will be built somewhere within the Niagara area.
Yes, it will be built someplace in Niagara Falls, New York, downtown, fairly close to the park by the falls.
How large a facility are we talking about?
Well, I really can't say now because we are, the size of the facility will depend on the site itself, and we have narrowed down we have narrowed our interest to 4 sites now, and some are larger than others, and so these consultants will have to address that. So I personally would like to see the building really stand out from the other buildings downtown, especially in future development. If we want visitors to go there first, it should be something that will catch the eye and be, like I said, very attractive itself. So they'll be curious and want to go in and see what's there. And from that building, they can go to everything else because they'll talk about what else there is in the downtown Niagara Falls and all over Western New York.
So we can tell our listening audience that planning it has been started. Mm-hmm. It's developing. Mm-hmm. We are using historical consultants to help you and your board and your team to develop this plan. Mm-hmm. And we're very conscious of the historical stars within the area.
Mm-hmm. That's right, and there are many. One in Niagara Falls, New York in particular, that I'm very interested in is Augustus Porter's house. Augustus and Peter Porter, you might as well say, are the two people who founded the village of Niagara Falls, which later became the city of Niagara Falls. And Augustus built the very first house by the falls, the first house in what is now the city of Niagara Falls, a beautiful Georgian mansion right by the American Rapids. And it was torn down early in the 20th century because no one wanted to spend the money to preserve it. Well, I would like to see it rebuilt, a replica of it rebuilt on the original site, which is now an empty lot, and made into a museum of the history of famous people who have visited Western New York, especially the Falls. And the list is endless, from kings and queens, famous writers, athletes, movie stars, you name it, they've been here. And some of the stories that some of these people have to say are so special and unique, they could be told in that house. And so there people could see what kind of home people built by this river, and at the same time learn a lot about the people who came here. The brick used to make that house was made with clay from Lewiston. The wood, all the wood in the house, most of the wood in the house was made from the oak trees in the forest around the house. So it was really a representation of this region.
That certainly would be a unique facility to bring tourists here and at least give them something to see. Old Fort Niagara has, over the years, been redeveloped. In fact, now they're building, or not building, they're redoing one of the warehouses into a hands-on experience center, information center. Don't you think that that's the type of activity we need to develop within the region?
Without a doubt. Every place that we develop should use the latest in technology, because our audiences today are very sophisticated, especially the young people. Even this replica of Augustus Porter's house could have all kinds of interactive displays inside, especially for the young, where they could experience history by making some changes, whatever they can do with computer graphics. And this is what we need to do. Every site should be brought to life. When I taught school, I always believed that what you teach you should try to bring it to life, make it really relevant to people. And history especially should be done that way. And we can do it here.
Now, events probably at the fort are probably held every weekend with soldiers from different eras, whether it's the Civil War or whether it's the Revolutionary War, or just, I want to say, campouts where they bring in people who will live like they did in colonial days and be able to show our young people and our families that type of life. What would you think of some events attached to the Niagara Experience Center?
Definitely, and I think that when we develop historical sites more, hopefully in the future along the river, similar things could be done, so as not to overlap though. Every site should be unique from the others in some way, so that we don't become redundant on reenactments. I certainly would want to take away from visitation to Old Fort Niagara.
But maybe like at the Porterhouse,
Right.
cooking
Yes.
from that age.
How were the holidays celebrated? In the winter holidays, how was the 4th of July celebrated in the beginning of this great nation? And there's so many things we could do to show what life was like here along the Niagara frontier and the Niagara River. And every site could do something